evening, ladies. Welcome to Growing Together in Grace. I'm Kathy.
I'm Ellen.
And we're so glad you're with us this evening. So, y'all, you're going to have to be patient with us. It's been
a while.
We
were outside last time.
We were outside last time. It's been several weeks.
Yeah, I know.
Since we've recorded. And
it was before Christmas.
Yes.
Wow, guys. It's been a minute.
Yeah, because it was pretty much right after we moved into this house. That's why we recorded outside.
We were outside.
So, that said, you're going to have to be patient with us as we get a little undusted off and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, we're in a different room, and the way we're set up now is different. We don't have a big table in front of us. We have this little stand, and we're out of Jason's new office.
Yes.
Which is in your bedroom.
Yeah, it's this little corner tucked away in our bedroom.
Yeah.
It makes me think of like a little sitting room, which is probably what it's supposed to be. But now we're using it as an office room until the shed. We have a shed in our backyard. And so we're hoping to, in the next year, completely deck it out and make it an office/recording studio.
Yeah.
So
I'm looking forward to that. That's really
so right
cool.
now this is what we are doing.
Yeah, and you know what? It works, ladies.
It does.
So
although I did tell Jason, I think I want to we not just for the podcast, we want to get a cute little it's not a couch, a love seat.
Oh yeah.
And then that would be where we sat. I've seen some really cute podcasts.
Yeah.
On love seats. I'm like, I like that better, but we just haven't found one yet that we like.
Yeah, no, this works. I mean,
Yeah, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
But anyway, before we jump into our new series, we do have a new series we're starting. We'll discuss that in a moment. Mm-hmm. I wanted Ellen to give us a life update, and then I'll do a life update as well, since it's been several weeks since we've seen everyone and shared life with everyone and whatnot.
Yeah.
So, Ellen, tell us a little bit about what's going on in your life.
So we have now hit the second semester of school, and it is crazy busy. We are really getting involved in church. We're Chad's teaching a Sunday school class. He's been teaching a Sunday school class since August. So it's been really great with him being able to do that. And then Chad is now he's serving in one of the committees. So that's really good for him. And then for me, my pastor's wife and I are leading a Tuesday night Bible study over Titus 2, over the book Adorned. And we're doing that the second and fourth Tuesday of each month. So that's been really great. We had a really great turnout the last couple of times that we've had our meetings. We've only met for 2 times, but we're going to be out of the study for a couple of months. So really, really looking forward to that. Really excited. I am serving on the women's committee now, and I got tasked with kind of planning out some of our special events for the year. So I am really excited about that. I have really missed being a part of a women's ministry and being able to serve on that. So I'm really excited about that. And we have a really great women's committee. So I'm excited to work with them and just hashing out some of those things. So I'm excited about that. What about you, Kathy?
Well, I have some interesting, exciting news, which Ellen already knows. But we were realizing we don't think we've told those of you who follow along and listen to our podcast or on our Facebook page. I'm pregnant.
Yay! I knew this for a while.
I'm 13 weeks.
Yeah.
It's been kind of a wild journey. And in fact, when we recorded our last episodes, I think we did 2.
Yeah.
In my backyard where you saw and heard all the crazy nature sounds. I was miscarrying, actually. I thought I was miscarrying that episode.
Because we left and you went to the store and then you texted me and it was very upsetting. And
because we had told you guys that morning. Yeah. It was it was hard.
Yeah.
But then I don't know if I shared in the Facebook group, but I shared on my personal Facebook page.
I'm pretty sure you did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think you did. Yeah.
So yeah, several weeks later, I kept thinking something's off.
Yeah.
And I'm still acting very pregnant. And it was 4 weeks after when I thought I miscarried, and that it's unusual. And so I ended up going back in and get some more testing done. And then they did special ultrasound, and that's when we found out I didn't miscarry. I was still very pregnant. I was like, what?
Yeah, so we're in a group text with another friend, and she sends both of us this long text. We're like, oh my gosh. Yes. I was so excited. I was at work, and I thought I was going to start crying. I was so excited to hear this.
It was definitely interesting. And, it's funny. I also ended up finding out because what I ended up having was a hemorrhage. And so they had to monitor me extra because of all the bleeding and stuff that I was doing. Yeah. But one of the things they did is they did a blood test. They're like, you want to? I'm like, why not? You're already taking my blood to check on me.
Might as well.
So they did a blood test to see if I was having a boy or a girl. So I am having a boy.
Yeah, I know.
Which I'm so thrilled about because when I became a mom, I wanted 2 boys and 2 girls.
Yeah.
And it's exactly what I have.
Yeah.
So I'm very excited.
Yes.
So, yes. If you see me, you're like, whoa, she's gained weight.
It's a good reason why, okay?
I have not lost all control.
Right.
I'm growing a human. Now, I am trying to be very careful because I did start off on not at a great health in this pregnancy. And so I'm really trying to be careful on what I take in so that after the baby, I don't have so much to catch up to get back to healthy. Does that make sense?
Yes, makes perfect sense.
Plus, I'm older, so I know as you get older, things change. So anyway, so that's my update.
Due in July.
Yes.
So obviously when baby comes, we'll take a hiatus from recording and like she needs time to recover. And
probably 6 weeks. But I'm hoping that maybe in the summer, if things are slower on your end, we'll be able to like record twice each time we meet so that we can use those for the hiatus.
Yeah. But, and I think you shared on our Facebook page, but we're only going to release 1 or 2 episodes a month?
Yes.
Okay.
The goal is 2. I really would like to do 2 just because I feel like if we do 1 a month, I feel like we can start like losing our momentum. Does that make sense?
No, that makes perfect sense.
Like if we aim for 2, that will keep us steady.
Yeah. So 2 episodes a month, ladies, not every week like we've been doing.
So that said, we still have a few episodes in the library that have not been released. And I think 1 more left in our marriage series, which is our wedding day, I think. Have we shared that?
I don't think so.
Okay, so we have our wedding day 1 shared, which I'm looking forward to. And then we have the Amos Bible study that we did.
We didn't share.
Which Ellen and I were like, how have we not shared this podcast? Because it was a great study.
Well, it was also in the time that you were moving too.
Oh, that's true.
It was in that crazy time period where you were moving and still trying to set up stuff.
So we have a few episodes that are in the queue waiting. That said, we will, after the wedding episode and after the Amos study, we are going to release our new series on education. Yeah. And I think you all have heard already at this point, if you've been following along, Ellen is a public school teacher and I am a homeschooling mom. Yeah. And so part of this series, we're going to talk about today's episode is just kind of an intro episode. And then next week it will be Ellen, not next week. Then the following episode will be Ellen sharing why she went the public school route. And then after her, the next episode will be why I chose to homeschool. And then after that, we're going to do book reviews. Ellen has been given homework.
She said, I have a book for you. And I laughed. I said, why does that not surprise me that she has a book for me?
So she has a book called Going Public, Why Your Kids Can Thrive in the Public School.
Yeah.
And then I'm doing one in homeschooling. And so we'll do those and wrap it up.
Yeah.
So hang with us. We're going to do a fun series on education that I'm looking forward to.
Me too.
But today we're just doing like a little intro. And so I have a couple of questions. But before I ask the questions, I want to say to you guys, as we are kicking off this mini education series, Ellen and I want to make it so clear that there is freedom in what education route you take with your child.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to sit here and be like, Ellen, I cannot believe you didn't homeschool your children. What were you thinking? Like, that is unloving, not kind.
Yes.
And who am I to say that she and her husband didn't spend hours praying together and asking the Lord for the direction and the wisdom for their family?
Yes.
And so I wanted to make that so clear. And I know Ellen agrees. Like, we're not going to sit here and be like, this is the right way. And if you don't do it this way, then you're in sin and wrong. Because we both know people who have opinions like that.
Yeah.
And it cringes me.
Yeah.
I'm like,
And the point is to just kind of take care of those misconceptions because, you know, I know that when my first thought with homeschool was, was not good thoughts. Like they were negative thoughts. And I know that some people have negative thoughts about public school. So it's just to give the differences between the two and like take care of some of those misconceptions that people may or may not have about either one.
I actually have to, before we start the questions, I have to say something to that, the misconceptions. So we have friends. It's so funny. When they met us and we had dinner with them, and one of the first things that we do is ask them to share their testimonies and so forth, which you have seen. Well, these friends of ours are like, wait, you homeschool? I'm like, yes. Why? Like, I could tell it was like a what? Yeah. And so I was like, yes, why? And she's like, I would have never pegged you for a homeschooling mom. I was like, why? She's like, you look so cool.
Oh.
And I was like,
and what does that mean? What is the perception that she
So I asked her, I was like, well, what do you mean? She's like, well, you know, it's interesting growing up because she's my age. Yeah. So in the 80s, there was this, and it's still joked about in the homeschooling community. In the 80s and early 90s, anytime you thought of a homeschooling family, you automatically thought jean jumpers, pleated, pulled up dress pants, slicked over hair.
Long hair. Like, okay.
She's like, but I meet you and you're like this cool, fun mom who I'm like, I think that's a compliment. I don't know.
I know you're going, wait a minute. Where is this going? Where is this perception going?
So I was like, funny. You're not meeting the right homeschooling moms. And so eventually she met some of my friends who do homeschool. Like, wow, y'all are cool. Yeah. So it's like homeschooling has changed in 20
definitely.
years.
When I was little growing up, even when my kids were little, it has changed drastically from then to now.
And it has quite a bit.
Yeah.
So not every homeschooling mom wears jean jumpers and makes sourdough bread from home. Sorry, I had to make that joke because sourdough making right now, it's so big. I don't make sourdough bread, okay? Like, I just don't. I'll go to the store and buy sourdough bread. Now, I want to learn. I have a friend who doesn't make sourdough, and I've been joking. I'm like, can you teach me, please?
Oh, my gosh.
Anyway.
Well, it's funny you said that. I have to say that. So, when we first merged at our previous church, there was a lot of families that homeschooled. And actually, my youngest was the only one that went to public school. Yeah. So you want to think about perceptions. Some of the kids were asking Andrew, my son Andrew, in youth group, wait, you go to public school? Like, is there fights every day at school? And Andrew goes, no, there's not fights every day. So we simply say this. I think it's funny because it's just the different perceptions that
Right.
people have
Right.
of homeschool and public school. But anyways,
It is funny.
Anyway,
so let's jump into the episode. So
Sure.
how I want to do this is I thought it would be like a back and forth. Tell me a little about you and what you do.
Okay.
And as you're telling me that, maybe before you get to that point, you can share with us, how did you become an educator? Like, what brought you to that field, and how are you where you are now?
Okay.
And maybe even what your experience has been so far in the education world.
Okay. So tell how I got into education and like how I kind of first started. So right now I've been in education for like, this is my 17th year teaching.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I really had to think about that for a second, for a split second. So my title right now, I have a leadership role, and I am a literacy interventionist teacher. That is my actual title, but it's a leadership role. And I work at a school. So in public school, you have titled and non-titled. I work at a non-titled school. Titled is where it's, I believe the percentage is 50% or more are in free or reduced lunch. Our school is not titled school. So I also serve, because we're not a titled school, I also serve as the instructional coach on campus as well. That's kind of part of my job role. It's kind of, my job is more pulling kids for interventions, but I also help with leadership duties. So I've been doing that. This is my 4th year doing that. And then I teach elementary. So I've taught from grade 2nd all the way up to 5th grade. I've taught math. I've taught reading mainly. And then that's how I got this job as an interventionist. And how I got into education. So I am the oldest cousin on my dad's side of the family. And I always like to play teacher. And in fact, my cousins used to joke, you're going to be a teacher someday, because I just liked being the teacher. And well, because I was a little bit bossy too. But, anyways. So when I became a mother, and I actually was going to go to school to become a teacher. But at that time period, I had just gotten married, and I just decided I was going to get my associate's degree. I really wanted to be a wife and eventually become a mother and be a stay-at-home mom before I really thought about a career. So I didn't really pursue it. I stayed at home with my kids for several years while my husband worked full time. And then my husband lost his job, and we were praying where God was wanting to lead us. And we actually, he became really good friends. We lived in Fort Worth at the time. And so we had a lot of seminary friends, because Southwest Seminary is up there. And so we made a lot of friends with people that were going to seminary at the time. And one of our dearest friends, Jennifer and Danny's parents were they were directors at a children's home in Mississippi. And they came down to visit, and his dad was telling Chad how they have just been praying for house parents. They've had a lot of trouble finding house parents because, they'd be working with kids, and he said, it's a hard job. Nobody wants to do it, So him and Chad were talking, and then he came home. They were playing golf, and he came home and he said, Ellen, I want to talk to you about something. I said, okay. And he said, I feel like God I want you to think about this. So he told me how Danny's parents were struggling finding house parents at the children's home that they were directors at. He said, I really feel like the Lord is calling us to work with kids. Mind you, when my husband tells me this, I'm looking at him like, are you nuts? Like, what? I'm looking at him like, where are we getting this epiphany from? Like, he goes, I prayed about it on the way home, and I truly feel like the Lord is calling us to be house parents at this children's home in Mississippi. And I said, Mississippi? Are you insane? I'm a city girl, guys. Okay. I grew up in the city. I never lived out in the country. This was going to be out in the country. Laurel, Mississippi. Okay. One Walmart, one mall, and you had to drive several miles to get to either one. And I don't even know the population. It's probably like 50,000, probably less than that. Okay. Like it was a small Mississippi town. I said, I'm not moving to Mississippi. Have you lost your mind? No, we're not doing this. And I was angry. I was like, what has he got? What in the world? I didn't understand. And I was very, very resistant to it. Little did I know that my husband was praying that God would soften my heart. And then I found out I had just found out I was pregnant with Andrew. Like, I don't want to move to another state where we don't know anybody but Danny's parents. And I don't know anybody there. And he goes, well, just pray about it. And I will never forget, the Lord led me to Jeremiah 34:11. For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you, give you hope. And I thought, okay, Lord, if this is really what you want us to do, then okay. Packed up everything and we moved and we made the commitment for 3 years to be house parents to teenage boys. Mind you, these are kids that are coming from the state. They would call the children's home and say, listen, can you please take this? Can you please take this child or this child? Because we really want to keep them out of the system. Like they were like destined to like get into trouble or, get in trouble with the law. And so, a lot of times we took in kids that we just didn't know a lot of background about. But so we were in charge of the teenage boys, and boy, that was challenging at times because you're dealing with kids that had no structure. And so trying to put them on a structure, schedule, eating. Some of them have never really quite had full meals, or, they never knew which place they were going from place to place, staying at other people's houses. I mean, like some of these kids, they were coming from horrific situations. And so, in being there for 3 years and spending time with some of the boys, because we were in charge of the teenage boys, I mean, they took in our kids, like they loved our kids. We always did movie night. We did a lot of things with the boys. We had a pool. We did family night a lot of times with them. They come home, they do homework. And so Chad really had a really good rapport with some of our boys that we were in charge of.
Mm-hmm.
And so when the 3-year commitment, and we had teenage boys and then we had littles, like probably the youngest one was 3 to age 18. That was the range of kids that we had. And so, we formed a relationship with these kids because realizing that it's hard for them to trust people. And so just getting past that wall, and then like Chad a lot of times would help them with their homework. And he's like, I could really get into this. And so when our 3 years was up, we were praying, Lord, where do you want us to go? And the Lord put on my heart, I think both of y'all need to get into education. I think I had always wanted to be a teacher, but then I kind of let that slide
after
off.
becoming a mom and doing
Yeah, absolutely. That was not my priority at the time. And so, because Chad was sharing with me on and off, he even thought about doing online classes while we were at the children's home, that, I think I might want to be a teacher. And I looked at him, I said, I think you would be really good at that. And so we prayed, and he didn't realize it at the time, but I went and I called my parents and I said, Mom, Dad, I think Chad and I both really want to go back to school. Would you guys be willing to let us move in for a couple of years with you so that we can go to both. Would you be able to help us out with the kids? And so that Chad and I will be able to go back to school. And they were all for it. So when our 3 years was up, we moved back home. And by the way, never thought we would be back home. Never thought we'd move back to Houston. And Chad got a 4-year degree. He went to HBU and got his teaching certification to teach 8th through 12th grade composite science, basically any science. And then while his last year, I started going back to school. I prayed about it. I wanted to be an elementary school teacher, and I only had 2.5 years because I already had an associate's degree. And I went through school full time while I was working full time at a school. I had gotten a job actually through somebody at our former church,
Mm-hmm.
who actually went on the line. Again, this was God's working. Who went on the line and said, "Yeah, she goes to my church. I know her. Yes, I'll vouch for her." And the school that she worked at hired me, and I ended up being her assistant. And I was a teacher assistant for 3 years while I went to school full time. In that time period, I also did after school. When I would work my full day, I did after school except for the day that I went to school. And so I worked really hard and got my teaching certification 2 years later. And so that's how I got into education.
That is so cool.
Like, it just, the Lord really,
Planned
truly,
your steps.
He really did. And even like moving schools whenever I had to, or like I felt like the Lord was leading me somewhere, He always had a job lined up for me. Always.
That's awesome.
Yep.
To see His provision
Yes.
all along the way.
Yes. It's exciting for me to tell that because it was just God's steps every way.
That's
For
cool.
both of us, for me and my husband.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And cool that your parents were at a place where they could have you guys come stay with them to help.
Yeah.
I have several friends who have done that, where they've gone and stayed in their parents' either like top floor or basement and get through, and then it's pretty cool.
Yeah. I'm really thankful for my parents because they really stepped in and they helped us just go back to school by taking the kids to school for us, taking them to different events if they needed to. It was great.
That's awesome.
What about you, Miss Kathy? What got you into education? What led you down that route?
So I was a lot like you when I was little. For as long as I can remember, I would gather the little neighborhood. So I lived in I grew up super poor, and I lived in it makes me think of apartments, but it was duplexes. So it was all of these duplexes on this one street in Des Moines, Iowa, and lots of kids. And so I would gather the kids in my neighborhood and I would teach them. I'd like have little boards. I'm like, today we're learning about the letters, and my grandma, my mom, like, oh my goodness, look at her just right there in the driveway.
Yeah.
Telling all the children.
I can totally see you doing that too. Totally see you.
Loved it. And so that never Whoops. Guys, the table that we have right now is super tiny.
Super tiny.
And so Ellen's like, we're going to dump water. I'm like, you aren't. I'm going to. Because I talk with my hands.
I'm going to move that glass in a minute.
So I always wanted to be a teacher for as long as I can remember. Now, from like the age of 10 to like 13, I felt like that was going to be out the door for me just because of where my life was heading. And then the Lord rescued me from that environment. And then I was adopted and I came to know the Lord, and that desire came back into my life of, I think I could do this. And so for the whole, my junior and senior year, I was really praying about, because that's when you start thinking about what college you want to go to and what degree and all of these things. And I really started praying about it. And my junior and senior year at my high school, we had to take electives. and I chose to be a teacher's assistant in a fourth grade classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved my teacher that I worked with. Her name was Mrs. Pridemore. I don't think she's living anymore. I think she died of cancer. Loved her. I also loved when, so I went to a small Christian school, and so K through 12 was all in the same building, but part of the building was more the elementary side, and the other part was more the high school, junior high. Does that make sense?
Yes, makes perfect sense.
But we would see, if I was walking to the office, the students would come out or something.
Yeah.
And there was something special about all these kids coming out for their next, what if it was PE? Miss Nelson, hi.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, look at that. So I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved being a TA.
Yeah.
And then fast forward to when I graduated. Jason and I are dating at this point. We're pretty serious. I'm pretty sure we're getting married. In my mind, I didn't have like a strong desire to go anywhere, but my parents really pushed to go to college and get a degree. And so I'm like, okay, well, I knew at that point I really wanted to be a stay-at-home mom.
Yeah.
I still loved teaching, but at that point, I'm like, I just want to be a mom.
Right.
But my parents like, you need to get a degree. So I'm like, okay, what do I love to do? What am I good at? What would allow me to be home with my kids?
Yeah.
Like in the summer or on holidays. And that's when I was like, teaching. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I went and got my degree in education. I started off as a English high school teacher, but then when I had to do my practicum, it's like, nope, not doing high school.
I'm telling you, when you get into that teaching practicum and try it, and then when you get into a master's degree, woo! I
decided pretty quickly. I was little and these people were massive.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not doing this. Plus I felt like high school would probably still have a lot more. I would bring a lot of work home with me.
Yeah.
Like grading their papers and stuff like that. So I decided, no, I still want to do education, but I don't want to do this. What do I love? And so I sat there and thought, oh, I love young children.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I also love working with children who people don't see a lot of hope in. And that's because I'm not even sure I've told you this. Have I told you about, sorry, this is a little tangent, but it will make sense to what I'm going to share. When I was in 7th grade, so do you know I repeated 7th grade?
No.
Okay.
This is my first time hearing about this.
Yes. So when I was in 7th grade, my first year of 7th grade, I had missed from 5th grade to 7th grade. So a 2-year school, I missed a year and a half of school.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Well, you can,
it was the situation you were in.
You can imagine when you miss that much, how much gaps.
Yes.
You've got to fill in.
Yes.
So by the time I reached 7th grade, this was around the time where George Bush was president and he was No Child Left Behind.
Yeah.
That was a detriment to me and to the education system. If you ask me my opinion on that.
Yeah.
They just kept pushing me because they didn't want to leave me behind.
Yeah.
But the problem was they were leaving me behind. I was significantly behind.
Yes.
So my first year in 7th grade, my English teacher, Miss Canny, I'll never forget it, calls me out in my classroom and says, I need you to come into the hallway with me. And so she's there and my assistant principal's there and my principal. And all three of them said, we've done everything we possibly can to help you. We don't know what else to do.
Yeah.
So why we're meeting with you right now is we want you to understand that we are putting you in something called school within a school, which really is their fancy way of saying you are a lost cause. I'm not even kidding.
Yeah.
I'm putting you in study hall. You're just going to be in study hall when you come into school. So literally, Yeah, they pretty much gave up on me. They saw no hope. Which, like, knowing who I was and where I came from in the direction, I could understand that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's when I like, what? So I just gave up completely at that point. So I didn't want to do high school. I knew I wanted to work with children who needed that extra love and care.
Yeah.
And I wanted a younger kids.
Yeah.
Because I felt like they would be still more
moldable.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So I went into early childhood special ed.
Okay.
Why
did I not ever know that you had an emphasis in special ed? You said early childhood, but I didn't realize special ed. Okay.
So I finished, in my last year, my senior year, my favorite teacher was my special ed teacher.
Okay.
She just made me love education and made me want to continue to work towards working with children with special needs.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I was actually doing my senior year is I was working with an organization called, I was an American Reads tutor, which is where they would pull students out and I would help them
read. Yes.
Read.
I'm familiar with that program. Okay.
Loved it.
Yeah.
Loved it. And you know, I love to read.
Yes.
I love reading.
I don't know what gave me that idea.
So I love reading. I love helping these kids. Yeah. Like several of my kids were fourth graders reading at kindergarten.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh, this is so sad. And I will never, ever forget. And this is the direction. This is how I got to where I did get. There was this kid. Oh, like I have a picture with him because he's just precious to me. And I don't know where he is to this day, but he had such an impact. So, you know, when you pull students, you sit with them at a table.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did for a whole year. Well, at the end of the year, at the end of each semester, you had to do an assessment to see how well they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the year, he was almost at reading level.
Wow.
And I will never forget. I might start crying.
Don't start getting me. Oh my God.
Goodness.
This is where I get emotional about kids.
He was like, and I'm married actually, so I'm now Mrs. Allison. It's like, Mrs. Allison, I can read. And I was like, oh. And he was like, you taught me. And I was like, oh. And so he and from that point on, he was walking on cloud 9.
Yeah.
And he was just like over the moon ecstatic that he can read and he loves it. And I'm like,
have you read the story, Thank You, Mr. Faulkner?
No.
Oh my God. Okay. That's a book.
Is this a children's book?
It's a children's book.
Oh.
It's about Patricia Polacco.
Okay, I know who Patricia Polacco is.
Oh my gosh, I will buy you that book.
I know who she is. I have a few of her books actually. I
will buy you that book.
So it was just like, okay, now I know
it will make you cry.
Now I know what I want to do at that point. Because I was trying to decide, do I want to work in the class? Because with my degree, I could work in the classroom or I could work in a private sector and do like more developmental, occupational stuff that. I was like, no, I want to continue on and become a reading specialist, which at that time, I don't know if this is still true, required a master's.
It doesn't. It doesn't. It depends on what district, because technically I am a reading, the dyslexia specialist is considered a reading specialist in my district. But if I was at another district, I would be a reading specialist. If that makes sense.
So
it depends on the district.
So it was probably 6 weeks before I found out I was pregnant with Joshua, where my special ed teacher that I loved dearly pulled me aside and said, hey, I really want you to think about coming back on as a GA for a master's program and in working with me in the special ed.
Cool.
And I said, that's so interesting that you brought this up, because I really feel pulled into wanting to be a reading specialist teacher and working with. She's like, let's do it. And so I was filling out all the paperwork and getting ready to apply to grad school to be her GA. And then I found out I was pregnant.
God had other plans.
Yes.
It's okay.
So I ended up having to tell her that I will not be pursuing that. And the two reasons were because at then Jason was going to have to find a job full time, and I wasn't guaranteed it would be where we were living at the time.
Right.
And it wasn't.
Yeah.
We ended up moving to Texas.
Yeah.
And also, from the moment Jason and I were talking about starting a family, we knew that I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom at least the first 5 years.
Yeah.
And then after that, we would see where God was calling us.
Yeah.
And so fast forward to Joshua turning 5, it was very clear that I'm going to
And
still
this
stay
is when
home.
y'all
Living in
moved.
Texas.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're living in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Joshua's 5, Evangeline's 3, and it's still very strong.
Yeah.
The Lord wants me home.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I stayed home ever since. And obviously that meant we prayed about education.
Yeah.
And so I am still in education, but I teach my own kids.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Anyway, so all of that to say
that is a really cool. Your story is really cool, and my story is really cool because
each step.
Because the Lord called us to education, but in different avenues of education.
Yeah. And he led when you were sharing your story, it's interesting to see how he was like, you guys are going to be house parents here.
Yeah.
And you guys had such an impact.
I had no desire to be a house parent. No.
Y'all had such an impact there, and you both felt that love and that joy of seeing the impact on these children.
Yeah. And
it led you guys to where you are.
And let me tell you, so when Chad and I first got teaching degrees, and when we got our first year of teaching, we both got jobs at Title I campuses. And because my husband has a degree in
so
high
Title
school.
That's the one where 50% of the population gets the free lunch.
Yeah, free or reduced lunch.
So that probably means it's more of a lower.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they're low economic students, and a lot of them are not coming from good homes, situations from home. And so working in the avenue of being house parents and then working in a title school for a long period of time. In fact, I was working at a Title I school until I came to the district that I'm at now. It helps you bring in a different perspective on how to look at your students and know exactly where they're coming from, because you had the experience of dealing with students or dealing with kids that came from situations like that, and giving more like empathy to them. Yeah. So I really feel like the Lord put us in that to help us see and have more of an impact in public school education.
And I have to say this to you all. Chad and Ellen do have quite an impact within the education, especially Fort Bend. We joke with Chad. We've gone out to dinner with them. And there was this one time where it was us and them and some other friends of ours. And like 5 times. Mr. Bishop!
Every time.
Are you paying your students to come out here so we think you're cool? He's like, no, I'm not. I'm really not. So you all do have quite an impact.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really cool. It's really cool to see that and to know that we have an impact.
So we've talked a lot about some of these things. So let me ask you, since we're talking about education and that we both teach in different avenues in different ways, what do you love the most about teaching?
Oh, wow. That is a question that I actually was trying to think about. I love knowing that I'm making a difference in somebody's life.
Yeah.
I love that because I work with elementary school and my husband works with high school. And so I love the fact that, what I'm teaching my students, even just not just even curriculum, but like just, life skills, attitude, showing kindness, showing grace, you know, even though I do work at a public school, just showing my love of Christ
Mm-hmm.
uh, to my students is just, to me, that's what I love the most. I love that my kids come from different backgrounds. It's the fact that they're little and knowing that I have an impact on how they're going to look at themselves as kids, how my the way I teach them is going to impact the way they learn, just not even then, but like when they move on to middle school, high school, and even when they become adults,
Mm-hmm.
because elementary school is where they learn so many foundational skills,
Mm-hmm.
not just education wise, like academic wise, but like even social, emotional, all
Mm-hmm.
those things. And I love that. I love the fact that it's different kids every year.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the same kids, but I also love the fact that the kids that I have taught, and I've been teaching for 17 years, and there have been times where I have run into my students, and I have so many students, and it's so hard to remember their names. But I'll never forget this. I was out Christmas shopping one time. I was at the Galleria with my husband, and I was checking out. I was buying something for my daughter, and the girl that was at the cash register, she looked at me and she goes, "Miss Bishop?" And I looked at her and I said, "Yes." And she goes, "You don't remember me, do you?" And I'm like, "I'm so sorry, I don't." And she said, "Yeah, I was in so and so's class." And she told me the name of the school. It was my first school that I was at when I was a teacher assistant. And I immediately I said her name, and she goes, "Yeah, that's me." And the school that I was at, we just there was just so many situations that the kids came from, and it was just sad at times. I would cry because I knew some of my kids were just in horrific situations.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, uh, I've had kids whose parents are like they're head people in gangs,
Mm-hmm.
and the area that I was in was a rough area, and we knew the gangs that were pretty dominant in that area. And you're dealing with parents that are like in some high ranking, they're high ranking in the gangs that are in that area, so it was a little bit scary at times. But it has come to say that this student who I saw, who I wondered at times, she told me she was graduating that year, and I said, "Well, what are you going to do with yourself?" She goes, "I am going to go to Baylor University. I want to be a nurse." She had already been
Wow.
accepted, and she was going to get a nursing degree.
That is so cool.
And so that made me so happy. And just knowing that, I still have kids that come back to me and say, "Hi, Miss Bishop, do you remember me?" And like I said, 17 years of teaching, I'm just like, and they change so much. I'm like, "No, I don't. I'm sorry." So that really, just knowing that I make an impact
Mm-hmm.
on kids every day, that means a lot to me.
Mm-hmm.
And just knowing that I have made an impact. I have a little box that, like, when kids make me things, I put it in that box. I still have that box
That's cool.
full of stuff. And if there are days where I have a rough day, I'll go to that box and I will look at it, at the letters, the pictures. I have some really cool stuff in that box. Um, I had twins in my class one year. One was in one class and one was in the other. And they made me this little booklet, and one was an artist and one was a writer. And it was it was on the 100th day of school, and they gave it to me on the 100th day of school, and it said 100 reasons why we love Miss Bishop.
Oh,
It was a little booklet. I'm like, "Oh my gosh,
that's
I love it." Just
sweet.
little things like that I just keep as mementos. Just knowing that I have an impact. Sorry about bunny hole, but you know,
That's cool.
yeah, yeah. Well, let me look at the question. What about you?
What do I love about teaching?
Yes,
I've jumped down
teacher.
towards the bottom because
Okay,
we've
got
answered some questions.
yes. Okay, what do you love about teaching?
I would say for me, because I'm home with my children and I
Mhm.
homeschool and teach them,
Yeah.
the biggest something that is a joy, yes, for me. Like, this is why I'm doing it. Is getting to see my kids understand something. Like, I'm not missing that. Like,
Yeah.
I'm thankful for the public school system, for the people who don't have the opportunity to homeschool or just don't feel called to.
Yeah.
But for me, I get to see, like, I'll just take it even all the way to Dorothy. I get to see her first steps, her first words. I get to see her draw her first circle, which she learned this week.
Oh.
Now, let me just tell y'all, I've got so many circles everywhere. Like everywhere.
Even on the dog.
Even the dog. And a rainbow. Did you see the rainbow in the fridge?
No, I didn't.
Yes.
You have to show me that before we
So,
leave.
like, I get to see that. Like, her first rainbow. I get to be a part of that.
Yeah.
I get to see my 11-year-old who reads and reads and reads and reads and reads, which,
she does love reading.
This reading mama makes me proud. And so I love to see that love of hers. And I love how she'll come into the kitchen throughout the day after she's finished a subject. Like, hey, can I tell you about this book? I'm like, yes, tell me about your book. So we get to talk all day long.
Yeah.
Now, are there times in my day I'm like, I don't want to talk to anybody? Yes.
Yeah.
But
oh, yeah.
I will say, for me, the biggest thing that's been really God's kindness, because there are hard days regardless of what you do. But when you're home all day with your kids, and you just feel like, okay, am I even doing anything? Is there any kind of impact? When you see your 14-year-old son say, Mom, thanks for staying home.
Oh,
thanks for saying no to a career and a job and staying home and teach me. I'm like, make me cry like a baby, why don't you? And my 11-year-old saying, Mom, thanks for teaching me not just math and science, but also how to bake. And y'all, she outbakes me now.
Okay, I can attest to that because I've had some of your daughter's baked goods, and oh my gosh.
That's not to say that, like, people who put their kids in school can't teach their kids how to bake. But I know when you are working full time and your kids are in school full time outside of the home, that time is so limited, right? What you can teach your kids. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I think the joy for teaching that comes from me is I get to educate the whole child. And what I mean by that is I'm not so forced into
just
maths.
academics.
Yeah. I get to
life
teach them
skills.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I
Absolutely.
love that. And that would be my biggest joy, is getting to see the life skills come out in them.
Yeah.
And then also I would say the reading. I say this, and I know you would agree with me on this.
Yes.
I say this all the time. If you can read, you can do anything.
Yes.
A
book gives you knowledge.
Yes. So for me, I've taught all of my kids, except Dorothy, to read.
Yeah.
And when they get it, when it clicks finally and they're off and running, I'm like, yes. So it's when they get when they get it, I'm like, yes, they get it. They get it. Yes, they get it.
Yeah.
The other reason why I love teaching is I actually didn't have much of a childhood life.
Yeah.
I grew up in a very hard life. I was watching rated R and porn when I was 2.
Oh.
Because my uncles
Yeah.
were in charge of the television, which was in the living room. So whatever they put on is what we watched.
Yeah.
So whenever I hear friends talk about, hey, did you ever watch this show when you were a kid? I'm like, no, I never did, ever. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Did you read these books? I'm like, never. I never. So I didn't have a typical childhood life. I had a rough childhood life. I grew up pretty quickly. And so for me, one of the joys that comes from teaching is I'm almost getting to relive a childhood I never got to live. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
So I get to read
That's
books.
cool.
Oh my God, these are the books I missed.
You are my book person. I had a friend ask me, hey, I need some suggestions. I'm trying to witness this person. Are there any books I can recommend? And I was like, oh, let me ask Kathy. And she said, I hear my phone go, shoom, shoom, shoom. And I'm like, oh, yep, she's sending me her books. And even
I felt so bad. I was like, oh, wait, there's this one too. Oh, and Jason's like, yeah, calm down. You've sent plenty. She's got plenty.
Well, it was funny because I told my friend Kelly, and y'all remember Kelly because she was she was one of our guest speakers on our podcast. I said, I'm gonna ask Kathy, but I'm warning you. She's gonna send me a lot of books, so just be prepared. And she goes, okay. And so I'm sending it to her. I'm like, wait, here's one more. Oh yeah, and here's this YouTube video that she sent me. And she goes, her next text was, wow. She said to me.
Sorry.
No, I think she thought I was probably exaggerating, but when I sent it to her, she was like,
you were
like,
kidding.
wow, you weren't kidding. She does know a lot of books. Anyway,
the funny thing is when people ask me, what's your favorite? I'm like, you do not want to ask me what my favorite book is.
We could be here for hours.
I'm like,
which genre? Actually, she said that. I asked her one day, hey, I want to start reading some mystery books, but I want them by Christian authors. And she's like, okay, so what? And I'm like, oh my gosh, she has all these different mini genres that she's asking me questions on. But anyways, you are an avid reader. I love that. And I love that you have shown that to your kids, that it's important to read.
So Joshua is a reader, but he is so funny with how he reads. So this is still talking about reading and education, so it's fine that we have this little tangent. Joshua was my early reader. He started reading at 4.
Wow.
Took off running.
Yeah.
Evangeline was a late reader. She was not really reading until she was probably 7.
Okay.
And I just kept thinking, like why,
Yeah.
It just took her a little bit longer, but once she started reading, she was off and sailing. Like,
I know she's in her room right now. She is in her room right now reading.
Yes. So, but Joshua, I have to pull teeth to get him to read like fiction.
Yeah.
But you give him like I found him asleep last night with his math textbook open because he was reading and studying his math textbook. And this afternoon, he was laying on the floor reading.
That's hilarious.
His Zelda video game guide. So
was that what he was looking at the table?
So he reads like textbooks and like just I'm like, okay, you know what?
Procedural books, basically.
Basically.
Oh my goodness.
But to Dorothy talking about reading, because I do think how you model it is how it will usually play out in your family.
Yeah.
Yesterday I went to get Dorothy up from her nap and I came in and she goes, I just need 1 second, Mommy. I was like, okay, are you sure? She's like, yes, I'm just going to read a few books just for a little bit by myself. And then when I'm all done, I will come out. Okay, Mommy? I was like, who are you? And I was like, are you sure? She's like, yes. I'm like, okay. So I left the door. She read for like 30 minutes after she napped.
Hey. As long as she's not getting into trouble, and hey, she's doing something. She's
not calling on walls or dogs.
Yeah.
But I thought it was I just need 1 second, Mommy. I'm reading books. I'm like, you can have all the time in the world.
What kind of books do you want, Mommy? We'll get them for you.
So
that is hilarious. I love it.
Okay. I would say I think that we've probably done a great job, don't you?
Yeah.
Talking about just what our heart for it and why we're teachers and what we love about it.
Yeah.
So I think that would be a great time to wrap up. I haven't even looked. We might be right at an hour. Let me just look. We're trying to keep track of time.
Yeah, everything's different.
Yes.
Are we right at an hour? Oh, okay, cool.
So I'm very excited about this series.
Mm-hmm, me too.
I can't wait to hear how you got into public, which we kind of heard a little bit.
Yeah.
But I'll try to think of some key questions to ask you. Or as you're thinking through, you can jot down, hey, let's, I want to make sure I talk about why I chose this route. So we'll do that. That will be the next episode.
Okay.
And it might be nice as I'm talking to y'all, we try to record both of them at the same time.
Okay.
But we would release them separate. So very excited to hear why you chose public education. Can't wait to hear about the book either.
Yes, I will. I am getting her this book. It's called, if you haven't heard of it, it's by Patricia Polacco, because she never read it. Because right before we started recording, I'm like, oh my gosh, how have you not read? Thank you, Mr. Paul. I'm going to get you that book.
Yes.
It will make you cry.
Oh.
This is the book that I read to my students when I had a full classroom the first day of school. And the year that my mother passed away, there was one part in that book where it gets a little bit emotional, and I was choking up and I had to take a minute. But I still read it sometimes and I get choked up. But it's about a little girl basically who has she was living, so it was her mom and her brothers, and is based off of her like life story basically.
Okay.
And I don't remember what happened. I don't know if her parents got divorced or whatever, but her mom and her brothers moved in with her grandparents, and she's very close to her grandmother. Her mother passes away, and then mom decides to move them to another state. She's at a new school. She gets bullied, and there's this teacher that realizes it, but she was struggling in school all year, and this was the first teacher that ever noticed that she was struggling in school, and he took the time to teach her, like after school, before school. Like, it will make you cry.
It sounds like a great
book.
It
is a very good book. It is one of my favorites.
I've never read it because I love her. I have one of her, like her Easter egg book. I don't know. I don't know if that's the right title. And then I have one of her St. Patrick's Day books.
Oh, so I have a collection of her books. Because I was a reading teacher for such a long time, and so I have several of her books.
I'm so surprised I didn't know about that book.
But gosh, I will get that book for you.
So this was fun. I'm very excited to talk about
me too.
All the things that are going to come in this series.
Yeah.
And, I already started reading my book just because this is a book that I read every year, actually, as a reminder as to why I do homeschool and what keeps me homeschooling. So, but the book that you're going to read and do the episode on, I saw this and I've heard about this from several of my friends, even friends who've homeschooled, and then once their kids reach a certain grade, they put them in the public school system. I've heard from them. It's a great book. So
okay. I mean, it looks great.
It's why I'm like, I want to read it, but I'm going to have Ellen read it first.
Okay.
And let her do the book review on it.
Yeah.
So
she's so funny. She's like, I already have a book. I've got the book for you. I was like, oh my goodness. Okay.
So anyway, all right. Well, this has been fun.
Yeah.
I missed it. I didn't realize how much I missed it.
I know. I didn't realize how long it had been until I was like, wait a minute. It was before Christmas.
It was because so we moved in. It was probably the first Saturday in December, don't you think?
Yes.
Yes, because that's when Behold the Lamb of God was.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was that first week, right?
Yeah, it was.
Oh my goodness. It's been like 8 weeks then almost. Yeah,
literally.
That's crazy.
Okay.
Anyway.
Can't do that.
Sorry, y'all. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Yeah.
I'm Kathy.
I'm Ellen.
And we are growing together in grace.
It's too early for the pregnancy for you to
You know what I mean, guys. We're growing together in grace, and I'm Kathy.
I'm Ellen.
And thank you for joining us this evening.
Bye, ladies.